and welcome back to Just Ask Mrs. Hurlbut. I'm Mrs. Hurlbut, and this is episode 2. Still getting used to the light and the camera, and got this fancy new lapel mic. I realize that I need to stand up, and I can't, so I'm trying to get used to it all. Today, I've got with me my son, Toby, Mr. Hurlbut, another Hurlbut, who's going to be vetting the questions today on our topic, which is one-sided relationships. Toby, you ready to do this?
Let's do it. Thanks for having me, Mom.
If I can't have my students here, at least I've got other people that I love standing by my side. So let's
No
get started.
place, no
What?
place I'd rather be. Let's get into the first question.
Number one.
So somebody wrote in here, what happens when the one you like doesn't like you back?
Well, are we sure the one that you like doesn't like you back? And are you sure you like the one that you think doesn't like you back? What does it mean to like somebody? And what is it you're looking for in response? Lots of questions. So let's start with somebody who really just doesn't know you exist. Um, the question that I often ask is, could you be mistaking your like for infatuation, or infatuation for like? And what is infatuation? It's when you are uh, admiring somebody or crushing on somebody who may not even know that you are in their orbit. Maybe you aren't even in their orbit. When I was growing up, I had huge crushes on rock stars, and I used to dream about marrying them someday. That's infatuation. So ask yourself how realistic you're being in the choice of person that you're deciding to like. But if it is somebody who's in your orbit and you don't think they notice you, then make them notice you. You've got to communicate. People cannot read your minds. And you got to be brave, introduce yourself, say hello, ask if they want to go for a walk, maybe go on an actual real date, which is a whole nother topic of conversation that we can have. But you want to first establish whether or not they know you exist, and establish also whether or not you actually do like them and whether or not this is something you want to pursue.
It's hard. There's a gray area sometimes where you don't know if they like you back or you don't know if it's one-sided. What do you say, especially to, maybe boys that are thinking that they're supposed to make the first move,
Hmm.
but, they don't know whether or not they're kind of being a bother or whether or not they need to pursue a girl or boy harder in order to get them to like them.
Well, the boy doesn't have to make the first move. Uh, so, girls, you can step up and make that happen. Love is a risk. It's always a risk. If you want to date somebody who doesn't know you exist, you need to make them know that you're there. You need to talk to them, boys or girls. So make a move, take a risk, write a note, send a text, uh, walk up to them if you're on campus, whatever it might be, but approach them.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. Somebody wrote in here, when do you know you have put too much work into a relationship?
Well, that would be a very advanced move to know that, to recognize that. That's actually a good thing. So if you are feeling an imbalance in the relationship that is a committed relationship, then you've got to communicate that. You've got to be willing to speak your truth and ask for the things that you need. Again, no one can read your mind. But at the same time, when you're dating or in any relationship, it is all about service to another. You want to be doing things for other people. Um, but if you find that you're doing all the heavy lifting, I like to say, then you need to sit down and talk and ask the person that you're with what's holding them back. Is something up? Get to the bottom of why you're not getting anything in return. And to be honest, if you recognize that and they don't, and they're not willing to do anything about it, that is the time to, like I like to say, jump ship. So when you're dating, any sort of flag that's waving in your face, you should really look and decide whether or not it's a battle you're worth fighting. That's worth fighting for.
Yeah, I think a lot of people find themselves in one-sided relationships, or at least they perceive it that way, where they think that their partner might not be in the relationship for the right reasons, and it's tough to see that before it's too late.
And you, right, and you want to figure that out now. I always say that figuring out these kinds of issues in a dating relationship is so uh, liberating because you can walk away anytime you want. The key is to get through all of this now so that if marriage is your ultimate goal, you're not having those kind of stumbling blocks with your spouse. You've already worked all that through, and there's never going to be a time where it's only one-sided.
Well, speaking of one-sided relationships, we have another question here about ghosting. Somebody said, "How do I respond to somebody who's ghosting me, who's not responding to any of my messages?"
Oh gosh, are you in a relationship? That'd be the first question. Is it something that's you have both agreed that is a relationship, or were you pushing too hard on something that didn't exist? So first establish if it's actually ghosting. Check to see if there's something wrong with their phone. First of all, is it an innocent mistake? Ask yourself whether or not this is a relationship. Did somebody say let's commit to each other? Because if they haven't, oftentimes the ghosting is really just somebody living their life and not realizing they owed you anything. So if you're being ghosted, first check to see if there isn't a technical issue, and then decide whether or not you are in fact being ghosted based on where you're at in this relationship. And if you are in a relationship that is a serious committed relationship and you're being ghosted, that's a problem that needs to be dealt with. You've got to figure out how to communicate with that person and then decide whether or not you want to stay with that person. Because if someone's ghosting you and you're in a relationship with them, you deserve better than that.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the previous question about somebody putting in too much work into a relationship. I think in my experience, especially in high school relationships, different people have different standards of what's required to make a relationship work. Certain people just want it to be casual and not have much commitment, and some people have a high standard of the amount of time you're going to want to spend together. So it's tough to find the balance between the two.
Which is why you want to establish that. There's nothing wrong with two 18-year-olds who decide to start a relationship to say, what is your expectation here? What does this mean? If we're dating, what does this mean? And that goes for every element of the relationship, not just the dynamic with the electronics and talking to each other.
Let's move on to the next question. So, on a similar theme of one-sided relationships, we have a question somebody wrote in about supporting their friend. How can I support a friend who cannot see that the other person is not interested?
Oh, that's a tricky one. Hopefully, your friend trusts you and doesn't read anything else into that. If you're in a really solid friendship, you want to be a support, but you got to really navigate this with sensitivity. Stick with the facts. Here's what I've observed. Here's what I've observed. Here's what I'm noticing about you or the other person. And don't pass judgment, whatever you do, but definitely share what you've observed. Facts only. Once your opinion comes in, it becomes your opinion against your friend's opinion. If you come from love and say, I'm really concerned about you, here's what I'm seeing, maybe they'll change their perspective on what they've been seeing. That offers them a little wisdom when they've got another person making note of what they're seeing. But you don't want to lose their trust in you, and you want them to be able to come to you, and they don't want to feel judged by you. So you have to really handle that with sensitivity. You're doing your best to protect your friend, but you're also trying to protect the friendship that you have with that friend so they'll trust you when you approach them with these kinds of sensitive topics.
And I think on the other end of that question is, what can you do to help out your friend that you can see that you're not giving enough interest to their own partner. The flip side of that question.
Right? Especially if you're friends with both people in that
Hmm.
scenario. Yeah, it's so tricky because you don't want to get stuck in the middle of the relationship, but stick with what you've observed. Here's what I've observed. Don't share how you're feeling. Don't share how you project other people are feeling. Here's what I've observed. And so try to see it from this point of view that perhaps you are not bringing enough to this to this relationship, and maybe she's got or he's got a point, and just offer them a new perspective without judging them, without getting your feelings involved or anybody's feelings involved. It should all be about what you've observed and an intellectual response as a friend who cares.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think about somebody going on to, the point of different standards for relationships where, from an outside perspective, maybe they don't think this is a one-sided relationship, but from one person's perspective, they do think it's a one-sided relationship. Maybe somebody's standards, like we kind of touched upon earlier, is that they think they should be going on a date every single week or two dates every single week. But, the other person thinks that going on a date once a month is okay. It's tough because standards are always different.
Right. And standards are different because we all have different love languages. And that's a whole nother episode that we can talk about. But when you understand how you receive love, you're halfway there. When you understand how your partner or your friend or your family member receives love, that's a game changer. That's when you put yourself in their shoes and understand the things that they need to be fulfilled. Sorry, I can't get used to this microphone. And if you know that about them, then you understand that maybe you should go out more. Maybe you should spend more quality time together. Maybe you should do kind acts for this person. Maybe you need to stop and just give them a hug for a few minutes. You got to know how they receive love so that you can love them that way and not give them any false impression that you're not interested.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of these situations aren't very black and white.
You have to communicate it. I remember not being on the same page with my husband when we were dating for many, your father when we were dating for many years. And honestly, if I had known anything about love languages at that point, it would have made so much sense to me, his behavior and my behavior towards him. When all along I was thinking, well, he mustn't love me as much as I love him because I always want to, you know, go on dates or um, have dinner together. And that's not something that interests him. And so in my mind, I'm thinking it's a one sided relationship. Well, 30 years later, I learned that no, he was expressing his love for me in very different ways, mostly acts of service. And I wasn't even recognizing it. So it's really easy to lose sight of the way someone's loving you when you don't know how they receive love.
Well, it sounds like we could do a full another hour on love
We are.
languages, and we'll touch upon that more on a future episode. Let's move on to the next question. Um, yeah, this next question's an interesting one. It's one that I've happily or hopefully I don't think ever experienced in my own life. Somebody wrote in, "What if your friend likes your sibling?"
What if your friend likes your sibling, or what if your sibling likes your friend, or both? That's a
Tricky.
that's a tricky one. I've seen it happen. You got to be so careful because once you cross that line, it could be damaging to one or both relationships if it doesn't work out in the end. So the advice that I would offer in that case is go to the friend and be honest and say, I have a crush on your sibling and I'd like to perhaps act on that. And you and the friend would have to have a real serious conversation about what that means and what we would do if it didn't work out. Um, you'd have to make a pact that you wouldn't let this ruin your friendship one way or the other. And same with the sibling. If you actually start dating that sibling, you've got to establish right from the get-go, what are the boundaries we're going to set so that we don't interfere with each other's platonic relationships, and um, we don't put them at risk of ending also if we were to end. Really, really advanced move, but it can be done. You just got to communicate first with the person who's your friend, and then with the person who you have the romantic interest in, so that everyone's on the same page and the dynamic will not destroy any friendships if it doesn't work out. And if it does work out, wow, it can be absolutely amazing. You can be an in-law to a best friend, which is really cool.
Yeah, it's definitely a tricky one. I mean, I think that's rule number one of bro code. So I don't know how that would go about dating your best friend's sister. But
Bro code, that's a whole other topic.
yeah, episode 3, we'll go into bro code. Yeah, those are all the questions we had written in for this episode. So please keep sending them all in. Appreciate the ones sent in so far.
All right, so as you can see, it's still rough, it's still new. It's going to be slow and steady. Every episode, I'm going to switch up what I can switch up, but I'll always be answering your questions. So please send those questions in. I really appreciate the ones that have come in. Once I get a nice handful, then I can start putting them into little categories for episode themes. So
yeah, we turned on the YouTube comments. That was a technical difficulty. So
yeah,
YouTube,
leave your
Spotify,
comments, leave
Instagram.
your emails. We're checking regularly. I got a lot of support here, and everybody's on top of things. All I have to do is sit down and talk. So thanks for your patience, and look forward to our next episode. Talk to you soon. Bye, guys.
Bye.